This is the How Did I Get Here podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Poley. Coming up next is a conversation I had with Meg Galus. She's a pastry chef extraordinaire and the co-owner of Coco & Company in Chicago, Illinois. Meg Galus, thanks for sitting down with us.
My pleasure.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
What an amazing ride you've had so far. So you have your own little business now, which we'll get into, but as we always start on the podcast, like, how'd you get here?
Oh gosh.
Where'd you start? Why did you start? What happened? You went to the French pastry school, but did you always want to do cooking and pastry? Like, how did you get into it?
So no, I in second grade, I set out the very reasonable achievements or the goals of being a professional actress, a rock star.
Yeah.
The first female president of the United States.
Okay.
Yeah. Could still have that one.
So easy accomplished.
Achievable goals. But I really focused on acting. Like, that was really my thing. I said I was going to be a famous actress, and I went to college and got a degree in theater, where I did some acting, some costume design, some stage management, a little bit of everything.
No kidding.
For real. Use it every single day. I do, actually. So I did that. I moved to London for a bit, came home, and then was living in Chicago and working in sort of crappy basement theater, semi-professional, loosely termed.
And you're in your 20s.
In my 20s. And I was working, day jobs in office buildings, wearing blazers.
God.
Really not my deal. And I was not bad at it, but it wasn't very fulfilling. And when I was 24, my mom died after a long illness, very long illness. And as those things happen, you tend to reevaluate some stuff, even at the tender age of 24. I thought I was very old. And I started to kind of think about, like, really what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wasn't kind of happy doing what I was doing. So, in true pastry chef fashion, I sat down and I made myself some lists. And I made one list of things I was good at and one list of things that I really enjoyed doing. And then I looked for the crossover.
Okay.
And
that's, for being 24, that's pretty intuitive, no?
I mean, I guess so. I've always been fairly intuitive, inquisitive. My dad was an accounting professor. My mom was a kindergarten teacher. So I sort of had this mix always of, analytical and creative crossing over, which obviously, again, works out to where I am. And I read books on how to find your perfect career, and I dove in with all the gusto of me doing anything.
Right.
And I'd sort of I'd always loved baking, but it had never been like a thing that I thought was a viable career. Obviously, being an actress was a completely viable career, but baking somehow wasn't. But I'd always loved making cakes.
When you were acting, where did you see yourself winding up eventually?
Broadway.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Broadway, absolutely. But it's so funny. I miss it sometimes. Like, if I see a really good show, my thought is, I wish I was part of that. Not, I'm so glad I saw that.
That could be me.
Every once in a while, I see something that's good enough, and I'm like, damn, that must have been so fun to do. But for me, it was really always, and I'm sort of past it far enough to understand this now, 20 odd years, that I loved the process of it, not necessarily the performing the same thing every single night. I loved the process of creating the show. But that's why I say that it makes sense, and that I use what I did, because creating theater and creating food and restaurants and all of that, they're kind of the same.
Right.
Like, they're kind of the same, again, mix of craft and creativity, and the same sort of coming together with a group of people who are all bringing sort of different pieces of the puzzle to create an experience. That all makes sense to me.
Right.
It uses the same kind of parts of my brain. It's just in a different medium,
right?
I guess.
So you sat down, you wrote all these
So I wrote
lists.
These lists.
Yeah.
And I sort of realized I loved working with my hands. I loved making people happy. And I didn't necessarily want to do anything big and great anymore, like being the first female president of the United States. Like, it was more about sort of daily happiness. And that was one thing that I took from my mom, who was a kindergarten teacher, who didn't live a very big life, in the sense that she didn't go very far or do anything very public, but she made everyone's lives better in small daily ways. And I wanted to do that.
Don't you think the problem with society is she didn't make huge waves, but she changed people's lives on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
I just messaged my 3rd grade teacher about a month ago, and I found her through the school website. I sent her an email. I said, listen, I know 3rd grade was a long time ago, but you had an impact on my life, and you helped me with X, Y, and Z, and I still remember how you cared for all the kids and this and that. And she wrote me back, she's like, I'm fucking crying right now.
Yeah.
Like, this is a selfless job, a thankless job, and to get a message like this from you
years 40
years later,
right?
She goes, I can't tell you the joy that I'm feeling right now.
That's amazing.
And I feel like with your mom, it's a thankless job that isn't, I mean, it should be the opposite. It should be, we should be holding these people on pedestals every fucking day.
Absolutely.
And, they make shit money, and we pay attention to the Kardashians. So.
Right.
So what was on that list? What were the crossovers?
Again, I loved working with my hands. I loved being creative. I loved working with other people. I've always loved artistic endeavors. I never really, I take a painting class now, but I never really had one thing that I really loved, but I loved all of it. I just loved, making things. Yeah. I love chocolate. I love pastries. I love eating them. I don't understand pastry chefs who are like, I don't really have a sweet tooth. What on earth
what are you doing? Right.
I mean, I'd be a lot skinnier if I were like that, but I actually love chocolate. And almost all pastries. So I think those, I would wish I had these lists. Obviously, they were physical lists because this was many years ago now, so they were handwritten. I don't know if they still exist, probably somewhere. But it sort of it started clicking. And I had, again, always sort of loved baking as a kid. My mom had one of those, it's the Wilton,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
The catalog that has the Bert and Ernie cake-shaped pans from 1970 something. And in the back, in the back was it showed you the piping tips and so how to make each of the borders. So I taught myself how to pipe borders out of the back. I still have this book. I still have it. It's on my shelves. It's bright yellow. Yeah. So I'd always sort of loved doing that stuff. And I had sort of joked throughout the years, how people say when things get tough, I'm going to run away and join the circus. Well, I'd always said I'm going to run away and be a pastry chef. And
same thing.
I don't know why it never clicked in my head that was a viable career option, but it suddenly sort of clicked into place.
This was 2003, 4, 5? Yeah. So this was before the chef rock star. This was still kind of a blue collar job. Nobody really knew what a culinary art was. It was just kind of coming into its own. Food Network was around, and it was starting to get some stuff, but it was still, it definitely wasn't the, cover of magazines and sort of world that it is now. Right. And so I started doing some research, and the French pastry school is here in Chicago. This is a great place to start. So I went for a tour, and I walked in, and the kitchen smelled like chocolate, and I was like, I'm home. This is it. Yeah. And I looked around at all the things I could learn and do and create, and I was like, this is 100% what I'm meant to be doing. So you signed up?
I signed up. Yeah. And started.
2-year program?
No, 6 months.
Oh, so that was a 6-month program.
So French pastry school is a 6-month program, intense, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I signed, so according to my husband, if you ask him, I just came home one day and said, I want to be a pastry chef, and this was completely out of the blue. But for me, it made a lot of sense.
What'd he say? Okay.
He's the most supportive person in the entire world. So I did the 6-month program, and I said, okay, well, and I, of course, being me, did a lot of research during that 6 months of what kind of job I wanted afterwards. And I looked at restaurants and hotels and bakeries, and I sort of went into it thinking cakes would be what I really loved, and they are not. Right. I mean, I like doing cakes as often as I do them. I would never want to do them full time. So much respect for the people who do. Amazing. Not my deal. And so I really loved things that I learned that I didn't expect to love. there's really nothing that I didn't like.
That school puts you through the ringer.
It really
see
does.
A little bit of everything for the industry, and then do you feel like they give you the tools to go and decide which path you want to go down?
Yeah, I mean, it was, it was modeled after sort of an apprenticeship. The founders are French, and it was hardcore, intense, methods and technique. So it was the best foundation I could have asked for in terms of technique. There wasn't a lot of talk about what to do with it after the fact. And so a lot of people who I went to school with are no longer in the industry, got out and realized the industry was not at all like
correct.
school, which I'm sure is true for many, many, many things. But I did a lot of research while I was in school and really tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I had this idea that I would go work in hotels because I had this idea that hotels would provide me opportunities to travel all over the world and move all over the world, and we're very glamorous.
Yeah, that and cruise ships. Right, yeah.
But I read a lot about restaurants. And at the time, again, Food Network in its infancy, Gail Gand had a show on the Food Network called Sweet Dreams, which I watched. And I was like, this is in Chicago. They appear to be the very best restaurant in Chicago. I want to be the very best, so I need to work with the very best.
Right. Smart thinking.
I mean, and that's one thing that I tell, whenever I talk to people who are in school or at the very beginnings of their careers, I said the most important thing is that you work with great people, that you work with people who are going to teach you the skills and not how to make things, but how to work.
Right.
And that you develop those work habits and how you're going to develop, not just what you're going to make. It doesn't matter if you're making the fanciest little frilly whatevers if you're not learning all of the
That's
other
great.
stuff.
I mean, that's great advice.
It's the most important thing that I did, I think, working at that restaurant at the beginning, when I was surrounded by people who also wanted to be the best. We were competitive, but we pushed each other in really good ways. And like the people I worked with at the beginning, I mean, Dave Barron was there, Kim Floresca was there, Chris Kirst was there. Yeah. Like all of these people who have these great careers now, because everyone was sort of the same mind.
Right.
That we all wanted to be the best, and we held each other to those standards, and we held ourselves to those standards.
Yeah.
And it was also a restaurant that focused almost as much on dessert as it did on savory, which was important to me, and also probably gave me an overinflated view of how important dessert is for the rest of my career. And I went in, and at the time, the industry was very different than it is now, and we were all fighting for unpaid internships, which to now is insane.
Isn't that crazy how that flipped?
Insane.
I talk to people about, I was telling Angie, my girlfriend, about what staging is, and she's like, well, I don't get you went to Europe and you worked for free?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, for a year.
100%.
And they're like, well, how much money did you save up? I'm like, not much.
Nothing.
And she's like, they never paid you? I'm like, they never paid me a dime.
No.
And
you
just
spend all your money eating out at other places to learn more.
She can't understand it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I fought for and won an unpaid internship.
Yeah, one.
Yeah. Beat out other people for it.
So would you say that was your first award in the restaurant industry?
Yeah. And I mean, while I was in school, I was interning at a pastry shop on the weekends.
Which one?
Vinny.
Back
in the day when Dimitri owned it.
Yes. Oh, he doesn't own it anymore?
No. No, he sold it years ago.
Great pastry chef.
Yeah, he's great.
Well, he came from the French pastry school too, right?
He worked at the French pastry school, but he originally came through New York, obviously from France.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. And I was doing cakes, which again, I'm really grateful for that experience. But I was doing that for free on the weekends, going to school full time. And then I got this unpaid internship at True. Luckily, within a few weeks, someone put in their notice and I was hired officially. So I was making money.
Great.
A very tiny amount of money back when shift pay was a thing.
Yeah. Still illegal back then.
It's technically legal.
It's
we
gray.
all looked it up.
Yeah, it's gray.
But yeah, we were working, 14, 16-hour days for a set amount of money, no matter how much overtime was not a thing.
Right.
Scrubbing the floors until 2 o'clock in the morning. And that sounds horrible, but it really, again, set the foundation in so many ways. And like everything was new, when you're at the beginning, like everything is amazing and like everything is a revelation. And I stayed there for 5 years, which is 14 lifetimes.
Jesus Christ, man.
Right. And I mean, through those 5 years, I progressed up to where I was running the pastry program. There's some things that maybe I wish I'd done differently if I really go back and look at it.
But such is life.
But
hindsight is, good and bad.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, I learned so much. Some very hard lessons, some very, good lessons. And I left after 5 years and moved into the hotel world for a minute.
That's when you went to the Sofitel. So
that's when I went to the Sofitel. And I knew when I was leaving True, I was really burned out.
Of course.
The restaurant had been through a lot. Yeah. We had a different chef de cuisine who was, I'm not going to name, but was not a nice person. It was really, really awful at the end. And for a long time, I tried not to let that sort of ruin my overall perception.
Sure.
It doesn't anymore. Some things that like this was in 2010 that I left. If those things were happening now, I would tell people to blast it all over the place.
Right.
But we were like, nope, head down, keep working.
Yeah.
You're stronger.
Don't you feel, though, in life, again, to talk about hindsight, is whether it's a job or a relationship or a dispute, that time heals everything. And even though you look back, you still remember, even though it was so hard and tough and you're being mistreated, that you look back and you still have fond memories of certain things,
For sure.
And I think it's with age too. I look back at this, maybe especially like relationships and jobs, where I look back and I still say to myself, that was a fucking shit experience, but I met X, Y, and Z there, I had that, and I remember that dish and it was so good, and you don't really remember being screamed at or mistreated.
Yeah, I mean, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like, it's kind of a cop-out, but it's also kind of true. It
is true, yeah. True.
So anyway, I staged at a couple other fine dining restaurants, and knew that was not the right path forward, that I wasn't going to learn what I needed to learn.
Right. So what did you think about leaving the fine dining world of True? What did you hope to get out of going to a hotel? Because they're completely different experiences.
Yes. And I think that's what I needed. The fine dining world, for all the greatness that's in it, it's very insular.
Yes.
And you can get very narrow-sighted and narrow-minded. And I wanted to learn how to do other things than put really fancy things on white plates.
Right.
So I wanted to learn other aspects of my craft. I wanted to learn about different kinds of operations, and a different style. So I spent a year at the Sofitel, which I kind of think of as hotel boot camp. I learned a lot about systems. I learned a lot about managing people. How
did you decide on the Sofitel and not the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons?
I mean, part of it was just who was hiring.
Yeah, basically, right? Yeah,
right. Okay. I mean, so there were, limited options, and I sort of had this window in which I needed to find a job. But it had a good reputation, and the chef at the time was well regarded. It had this sort of French flair, which it's a French hotel. I like French stuff, so it seemed to be a pretty good fit. And the pastry chef who was leaving there was also well regarded. So it seemed to me that, it was a good place to be. It was an experience. I learned a lot there. It was not a long-term fix. Yeah. I learned a lot, and it was great. And it gave me some perspective, which I desperately needed. And then I went from there to the Park Hyatt. So the Park Hyatt for me, and I went there because Ryan LaRoche was the chef. I had worked with him at True. He was one of my True buddies. Sean Farr was the CDC. He was also one of my True buddies. Sean's
great, dude.
Sean's great.
Yeah.
I did not mention him before as one of the people who has a great career, but he is, and one of my dear friends. So they recruited me to come over to the Park Hyatt. So the Park Hyatt was really good in the fact that it was a hotel, but it was also in that really kind of fine, luxurious world. So the restaurant, Nomi, was very well regarded. Yes. It was going through some changes to be a little bit less white tablecloth and a little bit more approachable, but it was still really high quality. And the focus of the hotel was on F&B, which was not something I had in the Sofitel. The Sofitel F&B was sort of an afterthought. It was there as an amenity, and that's fine for that model, but it wasn't what I loved.
Hotels are always room-centric.
Yeah. Yeah, but the Park Hyatt was not necessarily. Partially because of the economics of how that hotel chain, at the time was owned by the Pritzkers and et cetera. Yeah. So F&B was really, really important. So we had room to really be creative and do the types of things that we wanted to do. We were yes, part of the Hyatt chain, but we were sort of the crown of the Hyatt chain. So we didn't have to go through anyone. We didn't have to have this waffle on the menu, or we did what we wanted to do.
You weren't a convention hotel.
No, not at all. And so we got to do a lot of different things. Again, I really got to create my own little world there. That was, I think, the place where I feel like I came into my own in a sense, in a lot of ways, in terms of the team that I created there, which still I'm still close to some of my longest team members, and they were amazing. Yeah. And we really were able to create something special in what we did. While I was there, I created the chocolate pop-up in the lobby.
Amazing idea.
It was so fun. It was so much work. I lived at the hotel. My arm went numb. It was terrible. But I mean, those are the stories that literally my arm went numb. I had to get physical therapy for 3 months because I was working 18-hour days and sleeping in the hotel.
Jesus.
But it was great.
What things from True being so fine dining were catalysts to the Park Hyatt?
I think more than any specific technique, again, it goes back to the expectations that you have for yourself, your team, your coworkers.
The attention to details.
The attention to detail, the idea that we do things the right way because it's the right way to do them. The putting the guest experience in front of our own desire to cut a corner or do things the easy way. I think all of that mentality is really the thing that's carried me through, carried through most of my jobs.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And really liking luxurious things, liking expensive chocolate, knowing
having the budget to do it,
and having the budget to do it, and having guests who appreciate, that we're choosing these items and these kinds of products rather than just mixing up some Nestle hot chocolate in the back. Certainly in hotels, in any hotels, there are some concessions that need to be made. You have to adjust. Not everything can be the most expensive, whatever it is. You have to put the emphasis where where it's going to be appreciated the most.
Right. For me, as with the hotels, it was always the bureaucracy that I could never play the game. It was going to meetings and having a meeting about a meeting.
so many emails.
Hey, we have a meeting at 10:30. Should we meet at 10 before the meeting?
Right.
You're like, are you fucking crazy?
Right.
And it was that world that I my brain just doesn't operate. I can't play ball. I can't play nice,
Yeah.
When you're sitting across from people that are just having a meeting and wasting your time to justify their paycheck or to hear themselves talk or to interject some idea so.
That was tough. I mean, at the Park Hyatt, that wasn't so much of a thing because as F&B, we sort of ruled the roost. That sounds horrible to say. I worked with some very wonderful people, and everyone had so much respect for each other, but also no one was going to tell F&B we couldn't do what we wanted to do.
Right. I worked at a convention hotel in Chicago, and it was like a stepping stone for F&B directors to get general manager jobs, assistant general managers, and if you did your year or 6 months there, you're out. It was a revolving door. Every 6 months we had a new F&B director. Every 3 months we had a new general manager. And you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
I didn't stay very long.
No.
So you're in the world of going to meetings and memos and emails, and you're like, enough's enough.
There are pieces of that that I still kind of miss.
The structure,
the structure, the infrastructure, and having a team of engineers where if the mixer makes, I can radio them and be like, "Hey guys, can you come fix my KitchenAid again?" Or, having that kind of support in various ways. Having reports sent to you that you don't have to generate about numbers, and just having that information really readily available. That's great. But I knew that I really wanted to get back into restaurants.
What did you miss about restaurants?
I think the things that were great about the Park Hyatt in terms of the focus on F&B had kind of shifted a bit. The ownership of the hotel had shifted, it had gone public. There had been some change in upper management. And not to say anything was bad, but it was just shifting.
The writing's on the wall.
And it was just in a way that I knew there wasn't much challenge for me there anymore, and I was still at a point where I really wanted to be challenged by everything, and it would have been very easy to relax into things.
Absolutely.
And just ride it.
You're probably making great money.
Get a good
You're in a
paycheck,
position where you have great hours.
Sure.
Yeah, great, you have benefits.
Yeah. Wasn't really working service anymore, and I could have coasted it, and that I wasn't ready to do that. Still not ready to do that. And Ryan had left and Sean had left, so my kind of anchors there were gone, and Kevin and Rob called. So Kevin and Rob called
from the guys from the Boca group.
From the Boca group. I want to say, so I left that job in January of 2015. So they probably called me in July or August. So at that point, Sean had agreed to go on as the opening CDC of what is now Swift & Sons. It was at the time Armour & Swift. But so he was already in the Boca group. He was working with Chris Pandell, who is also a great friend of mine, who I love. And they had sort of been throwing elbows and being like, hey, we're opening the steakhouse. We want you to come. And I was like, steakhouse? I don't know about this, guys. I don't think this is my deal. But I love restaurants. And the Boca Group, I had years ago actually applied to be the pastry chef of Boca when Giuseppe was still the chef, funnily enough. So they had a really great reputation for opening really chef-driven restaurants. All the restaurants were really good. They were, hyper-focused on quality and were very well regarded. And it was the type of group that I felt I could see myself with. Didn't think that steakhouse was really going to be my deal, though. They called me in, I want to say July, and said, hey, we're opening this Japanese restaurant. We don't need a pastry chef, but we really need a great opening dessert menu. Can you do that as a consultant? And I said, sure. So Park Hyatt knew it was not it was totally above board, right, but I did it as a consultant. So I did the opening menu for Momotaro as a consultant. So that opened in, I think, late September of that year.
So what is going from the French pastry school to working at True to going to a French hotel to working at an American style? New American to writing a Japanese pastry menu. At that point, what the fuck did you know about Japanese pastries? Yeah. Right.
Again, I threw myself in and did a lot of research. And
so where does the research? So where did it start?
Books, internet. The chef was very well versed in Japanese food, obviously. So he and I had a lot of conversations.
And who was the chef at the time?
Mark Hellier.
Mark Hellier, and he's no longer with them.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and French pastry has a lot of roots in French pastry, or Japanese pastry has a lot of roots in French pastry.
It's a great crossover.
All right, so this makes sense. If I can learn about some ingredients, to go with the style of the restaurant, I didn't have to be, 100% fluent in Japanese.
You could just
cuisine.
add ginger to something.
I mean, kind of, not I don't want to say we, bastardized it in that sense, but with the style of the restaurant, it made sense.
Right.
That I could achieve this.
Some of the best French pastries I've had came out of Japan.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Attention to detail is insane. That is the number one place on my bucket list.
I wouldn't even call it attention to detail. They're so obsessive that they take something like pizza and the dough of pizza, and they're just we're not even gonna make this good. We're gonna master this. And you're like, how the fuck do you guys do this, man?
It's insane.
So you're making Japanese desserts now.
And I went to Rod Marcus of Rare Tea Sellers too, and was bring me the ingredients, Rod.
Right. This is what I need.
Right. So created that menu. Great. That restaurant opened, and then they called me again in ballsy. Kevin called me at work in, I want to say, November, and said, hey, you're talking November, December. He's like, I know you're talking to Pandel and Sean about, Swift, but what would you think about Boca? And at the time, Boca was my favorite restaurant in the city. Lee had taken over about a year ago. Again, I'd eaten there. It was delicious. I loved the vibe. It was, again, well regarded. And I was like, yep, that's it. So I went there as the pastry chef of Boca with the intent of then opening Armour & Swift & Sons and being the pastry chef of both of the places.
And you were ready for that, you think? Okay.
I mean, I'd been running a hotel.
I was just going to say, the hotel sets you up for that. Multiple outlets, in-room dining,
Correct.
Amenities. Yeah, you can handle
banquets.
Yeah. And I would only imagine, I'm not a pastry chef, but I can only imagine that writing a dessert menu for a steakhouse is kind of straightforward right down the middle.
It's much more straightforward than other,
than doing Japanese desserts.
Correct. Right. Or Boca.
Or Boca.
Right.
Yeah.
And as part of the Park Hyatt team, I'd also gone and helped out with other hotel openings. So I had some accumulated experience. And it was really interesting to me that I could sort of, delve back into, fine-ish dining. Boca's not super elevated, but
still
refined.
Yeah. Pulling your tricks from True, right? Pulling tricks from True that you learned that, dust off. Yeah.
And then also, have somewhere where I could make a really cool ice cream sundae and just have fun.
Great.
Right? So it was Swift & Sons and cold storage. And I was still kind of overseeing Momotaro.
Yeah.
Which was insane. So, I mean, it was really difficult. I was at Boca kind of full-time for 4 months before we started opening Swift. We opened Swift in September of that year. So I was overseeing both of those places for about 2 years.
So there were 2 different pastry menus. So cold storage is an oyster bar inside the steakhouse.
Yeah,
correct?
They actually don't have it anymore.
Okay, but at the time,
yeah. So there was Swift & Sons, which was the steakhouse, and then cold storage was the attached sort of casual seafood bar.
Right. And so you had 2 different pastry menus there?
2 different pastry menus, but it was really the cold storage was ice cream sundaes, cookies, pies.
Okay,
it was very,
and a lot
very,
of crossover.
Very straightforward.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And Swift & Sons was creme brulee and chocolate mousse
and brownies, and right.
Like the number one seller when I was there was a deep dish chocolate chip cookie with ice cream on top.
Right,
like, correct. It was delicious, but
Sounds
it was
great.
very
right, yeah.
Both dinner only restaurants. So, the most challenging thing I think for me in that was not spreading myself too thin or figuring out how to spread myself between the two, because, I'm not someone who can just sort of set it and forget it and walk away. Like, I feel an immense amount of responsibility and ownership, not necessarily be there every second, but to be involved. And, I wanted to be there for both teams. I wanted to be there for, to be part of it and not have people feel like I was just like checking in
right.
or checking out.
Correct.
So I really want to be part of it. I had 2 different executive chefs, both of whom are dear friends of mine, but who are very different people with very different needs and very different styles. And so learning to sort of navigate those relationships was challenging.
Right.
And the needs of the restaurants, Boca's tiny, but Boca was a lot more needy than Swift, but Swift would walk into 600 covers on a Saturday night. Like, it's a different beast.
That's a lot to balance.
Yeah. It's very, very different. So that was a tricky thing to learn. But again, I think it was really, it taught me a lot. And there are things about both that I loved. And then Somerset was going to open. So Somerset was in the Viceroy, still is in the Viceroy Hotel, but not part of it. Was in the hotel, and we managed the F&B for the hotel, but we didn't work for the hotel. Right. So it was one of those situations.
That's always odd. I think it's a tough balance. Yeah,
it was very challenging. Lee was also the chef there, so it made sense for me to go and then just be the pastry chef of both of those places and let Swift & Sons go. And Momotaro had fallen off at that point. So we opened Somerset in September of 18. I lose track now. So that kind of got me back to those hotel roots of, having a restaurant, which was very busy. We were doing 800 covers Saturday and Sunday for brunch each day. Insane. We had brunch down to a science, so it was great. So we had a really good restaurant. It was really doing very well. We had sort of the banquets and all of that kind of stuff going on too. But it was definitely a side note to the restaurant. The restaurant was the main focus, and not. So because we didn't work directly for the hotel, there weren't those crazy moments of the GM coming down and being like, I need a super VIP amenity in 45 minutes. It has to be the most creative thing you've ever made. So we got away from that side of the hotel stuff, but still had kind of the room to play, and I was able to do breakfast pastries really for the first time consistently in my entire career, and do some chocolate work and some other fun things that we couldn't do at the other places. Yeah. And then March 2020 happened.
Yes.
So we're almost up to date.
Yep, we're getting there.
We're getting there. So I was Boca and Somerset. March 2020 happened. We shut down. Spent a week cleaning out all of those places. It's very weird. Never went back to Somerset. So Somerset in the meantime changed hands. So the hotel took ownership of it. It made sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was back at Boca. So I was off. I was laid off, or not. I was furloughed. Something I never thought, I never thought I'd be filing for unemployment.
Right.
Like,
crazy.
Like many people.
Yeah.
I was furloughed. I was home for not long, maybe 5 weeks before we decided to reopen to do takeout from Boca. And I look back at that time, it's really interesting to me. It sounds horrible to say it was fun because the world was falling apart.
Correct.
But it was kind of fun.
It was awesome.
Like, it was challenging.
Yes.
It was a completely different set of circumstances that it was a new puzzle to solve. And like, I love that.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about sitting down and problem solving with a team that just really, I love so much. And it was hard and it sucked.
Did you feel those 5 weeks where it was almost PTSD? Like, there was
totally.
you didn't really know what to do. There was no one calling you to tell you something's broken. There was no one calling you to say we're out of sugar. It was just kind of like I'd wake up and I'd be like,
Yeah.
And then what happened is, I think, I've talked to a couple friends about this, but I fucking loved it.
I loved it.
despite my friends losing their businesses and all the
course,
death and
it's
destruction
horrible.
and the anxiety
Yep.
and the politics of it, like I thrived
Yep. me
during
too.
that time.
Did yoga every day.
Did yoga
Took
every
walks,
day.
read books.
You know, I'd make dinner for myself and then realize like I'm done for the day and it's 5:30 and I'm gonna go to bed. There was no rules. It was like almost being like a little kid with absolutely like Home Alone.
It was like
there's
summer
no
break.
rules. Summer break. Yeah.
So,
like how did you
Navigate that?
navigate that? You know?
When we shut down St. Patrick's Day weekend, I remember this is locked into my brain because we had just done all these really fun St. Patrick's Day pastries for Somerset brunch and no one ate them. They were so cool. It's like the last photos on my phone, on my my camera roll from Somerset. It was a relief when we closed because we had seen the covers dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping, and there were all these rumors and newses and people were canceling trips and and it was. And I had just been in Arizona for spring training to go to a couple games, Cubs games. And we were in Arizona and we were at the Cubs game, and I had a friend in the Cubs organization, and we were supposed to meet up with her after the game. And we were texting, and she's like, "I'm so sorry." She's like, "We got to get out of here and make sure we can get a flight back to Chicago. We're going to pack up the house right now."
Yeah.
And we were at this game and we were looking around and no one was watching the game and everyone was just watching their phones because it was the day the NBA canceled. And so we're like, okay, well, our flight's tomorrow morning. We're getting the heck back to Dodge. And then we went back to work for a couple days and that was it. My husband was unemployed at the time. He quit his job in January of 2020, which is a completely different story. But it was fine. So, spent a week cleaning, went home. And that first week I was manic and I was, again, making lists upon lists. I had dry erase boards. Yes. I had lined paper. I was like, I have to maximize this time. I have to be efficient. I have to make the most of it. I had lists of, things to learn and things to do and things to clean. And it was pastry chef with nowhere to go.
You can't sit still.
I started stress baking because we'd been, we'd obviously cleaned out the restaurants. We'd given away as many perishables as we could, but I still had half a flat of eggs and a 50-pound bag of sugar in my... So I made croissants, I made sourdough, I made for
nobody.
For my neighbors. I actually became best friends with my next door neighbors during quarantine. They're literally our best friends now, and it's kind of amazing. We lived next door to each other for 10 years and never exchanged more than
well, because you're never around.
I was never
working.
around.
Yeah.
Yep. So I started stress baking for the whole building. The whole building actually got really close. We started doing outdoor movie nights, and we would have happy hours where everyone was sitting on their decks.
That's cool.
Drinking.
Yeah.
It was really great. But once I got sort of over that, I created Slack channels so all my teams could stay in touch, and we had, oh my god, oh, it was crazy. But then we started relaxing a little bit, in the middle of the world falling apart. And I did yoga every day. I took walks and I read books.
The happy hour Zooms always got me.
Oh, I reconnected with friends who I hadn't talked to in forever because I was always too busy and working different hours than everybody else. And that was really, I think a lot of us went through this. That was that part of it that we were forced to stop.
Yeah.
And just stop.
Right.
And in the restaurants, you never stop.
Right.
Never stop. Even if you're closed for 2 days a week or a day a week,
it's never turned off.
Stop. And even if you have a day off, the restaurant still opens. You're still thinking about it and worrying about it.
I got to get the orders in for tomorrow.
And what about this thing that's coming up next week? And there's that offsite event, and you just never stop.
Yeah.
And there was this forced stop that was so interesting.
How did you feel about it? What were you contemplating? Where was your thought process? Were you thinking about going back to restaurants? What was your anxiety about what was happening next?
It's hard to remember. I was angry at first. I was angry to be furloughed. Also, I found out through the grapevine rather than directly, which annoyed me.
That's
is what it is, and to be fair, everyone was navigating a new reality.
Correct.
So
yes,
lots of grace given to those people who had to make big decisions.
Lots of good decisions were made, horrible decisions were made. Yeah.
The group took really good care of us. They paid everyone's health insurance in full for almost a year. Every single employee.
Yeah.
So I have to give them credit for that because that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Especially because my husband was unemployed. So we had no health insurance.
During the pandemic.
So they took pretty good care of us, and I don't really remember being able to contemplate what the future looked like, other than knowing we were just going to keep going.
The
We were going to
day-to-day.
fight. We were going to make sure people signed petitions and gave money, and like if there was work to be done, we were going to do it. So it really wasn't too far reaching. I do remember I did an interview sometime during that being at home time with Michael Nagrant. And he asked me, he's like, do you want your own thing someday? And I was like, that's such a hard question. I was like, yeah, I do. But the reality of it is,
when you're in the thick of the pandemic,
sure, I think about all the things that I wish I could do that I don't have, the space or the capacity to do now. But who knows what this looks like. But I do think, again, all of us realized this, that we'd been running so hard we hadn't stopped to think about what we were doing and why we were doing it and who we were doing it for.
Right.
And that's caused, many quarter/midlife crises in the industry.
Well, the sad part is I think a lot of like line cooks and things went through the same thing that we went through and then realized all the problems in my life are coming from my job. And we have this shortage of cooks right now because everybody realized this fucking thing sucks and I don't have to do this, and I can answer phones or work from home, doing something else, making more money and having less hours. So
I think, that this is, again, many industries are like this, but I think it's particularly clear in our industry that you have to pay your dues to get to, the good stuff. Right. And not to say there's not enjoyable parts along the way, there are, but there's a lot of work that has to be done before you get to that. And those kids who got kind of stopped at just when they were getting started, who had sort of lost the new glow of everything's exciting and everything's amazing and I can't wait to do this, who were sort of over that hump, but not yet to the hump where, they felt like they had some creative input or
it's enjoyable.
They were sort of in the midst there. I think they, got disillusioned, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And pieced out. And, I think we all realized that we'd given up a lot of work-life balance. We know that. We all know that. But we were really forced to confront what that might even look like.
Right, correct. I don't think that I knew what that balance was.
Right.
I think I had an inclination of my days off, I'm going to do this and this. But then 5 days a week, I don't have time to take care of myself because,
What does it actually feel like to do yoga every day?
Well, what does it
Instead of being like, I should do yoga. I really hurt. My hips are killing me.
Or what does it feel like to be like, hey guys, on Tuesdays between noon and 2, I'm not going to be here because don't call me, figure it out yourself. I have something to do. Right. And just to stick to that schedule. Or
I'm going to see these friends.
Yeah.
I'm going to make plans with these friends, and it doesn't have to be on a Monday between 1 and 3. Like, I can go out on a Friday night.
Correct.
I mean, not during COVID, but, theoretically.
Yeah. That the biggest thing I learned was no one's going to make balance for you or create time for you. You have to do it yourself.
Yep.
And then you have to stick to it. There's so many times that I was on my way to work out or yoga or do something else, or someone called me and I turned around.
Yep.
Literally in the parking lot of the place I needed to be, and I was like, fuck, I gotta go.
Yep.
Instead of being like, hey, fucking figure it out. I don't need to be there when the guy shows up to fix the oven.
Yeah, I mean, we all, we firefight. Like, that's part of the industry, is that you have to deal with what's right in front of you, and there's always something.
So what did the pandemic teach you from that?
I think a lot of my lessons came a little bit later. So just to kind of get through that. So we went back, turned Boca into a to-go restaurant, turned the entire dining room into, dry storage, and, so Boca has a basement where all the, equipment, pots and pans and all, we moved all of that stuff upstairs. There were 8 of us, it was 2 or 3 front of house people and 5 in the kitchen, and we were wearing double masks and temperature checks every day and wristbands and the whole 9 yards. And, we kind of had fun creating all of these different menus, and we do theme weeks, and I started doing brunch pop-ups on the weekends, and we were kind of being able to be creative, force creativity, but be creative and do some things outside our normal scope. And then we started opening back up again. You can open up for dinner. So we started doing tasting menus again. And we started doing, a little bit more. We could open the patio, and we could open all of these things. And we got through all of that. And all these things that we'd been doing, there suddenly wasn't room for those things because the real, quote unquote, work was back
to normal.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we got back to normal. And for me, and look, I love that restaurant. I love those people. I love that restaurant still. Absolutely. But when we went back to normal, it felt to me like moving backwards.
Yeah, me too.
You know, and part of that was because we'd been able to do these fun things like chocolates for, you know, chocolate boxes for Valentine's Days and these brunch boxes. And that doesn't make sense in that restaurant. And that's, you know, I would come up with these ideas and they'd be like, that's a great idea, but, you know, it's not right for here. It's not right for now. It's not right for this. And they weren't wrong. They were right about that. It wasn't worth the labor. It wasn't worth the time. We didn't have the space, whatever it was, they were correct. But those things
didn't change that you wanted to do
didn't
them.
change that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I'm gonna sound like such an old fogey, but I was like, you know, again, things had changed. I no longer had 2 restaurants. I had 1 restaurant. So I was working full time. I was basically back to being a prep cook. I mean, I'd gone back to doing the job I was doing 10 years ago. And I was looking around the kitchen. I'm like, it's me and these 24-year-old guys on the line. Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not 24 anymore. I'm not 34 anymore. What am I doing? And really, what's the future here? I love this restaurant. I love these people. I love the work. It doesn't have anything to do with that, but it's
you've outgrown it.
I've outgrown it.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that's really kind of what I came to, and it was a really, really hard thing to come to.
Do you think the pandemic, if there was no pandemic, you'd still be doing 3-4 restaurants, overseeing a hotel? And I know it's impossible to answer, but
it's impossible to answer. My guess is no. So I had gotten to the point before the pandemic where I knew that I was heading to that point.
Okay. You were already thinking about what's next.
I was already thinking about what's next, and that didn't necessarily mean outside the group, but it you know, was floating around my brain. And I had sort of made a goal with myself that 1 year from that point, I would no longer be in the exact same place I was. That didn't necessarily mean that I was in a different group or a different job or whatever, but there had been some progression, some change, some.
You didn't know what those goals are. That was just like, in a year, I better be doing something different.
I just knew that I needed to like have look to the future beyond what's needed for tonight. Because it's very easy just to fall into what do we need for tonight? What do we need for tomorrow?
And then years just go by.
And years go by.
You know, and here I am. It's like, fuck, I've been here 5 years already.
Correct.
Like, yeah.
And I was at Boca for 7 years.
Yeah.
Almost.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
And I did a lot with that group in that time. But I think, you know, a change was inevitable.
So what was that conversation like in your head? You didn't know what you wanted to do, but you needed to change. Those are some of, for me, sometimes that's the most dangerous, yet the most, when you come out of it, you really have to self-reflect, you know, and think about, what do I want to do? And you quit a job and you might not have made the right decision, or you might be taking a side step, but you have to keep moving forward, or a back step, but you have to keep moving, inching forward towards that goal.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes to navigate. Yeah.
Really, really hard. And, you know, I was talking to one of my friends, and this is January of 2021. And she said to me, she's like, so if you were going to do your own place, what would it look like? And I said, I don't know, because, you know, I never really let myself think that way. I don't ever let myself get past the thought of that, because, you know, it doesn't make financial sense, and it doesn't do this, and how would I leave the restaurant?
Well, your whole career, you've been attached to restaurants.
Correct.
Like, this is what the restaurant needs, and, you know, it's a concept you're walking into. I think it's always tough with pastry chefs, because you're walking into a concept that you have to work with inside this box. You know?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you have to be a little bit of a chameleon, right? You have to.
Absolutely.
The vast majority, there are obviously exceptions to this, but the vast majority of pastry chefs aren't setting, you know, the goal and the vision of the restaurant. I certainly had a lot of input, and I was a major part of that team, and I never felt stifled in that sense, other than the fact that I was always going to be somebody's pastry chef.
But if you wanted to put a slice of pie on the menu, there's no fucking way you could do that, you know?
Right. And it you know, it doesn't necessarily have to do with control, other than it was just a ceiling that, you know, that I was hitting. And so this is in January of 2021. And she said this to me, and I said, I don't know. And she said, think about it. Really let yourself think about it, because if you don't, you're never going to do this. Ironically, this is a friend who is now looking to open her own place, and I'm doing the same thing to her. But
what were you thinking about at the time? Were you thinking you were just going to go to another restaurant and be another pastry chef, or like how do you go from doing plated desserts to opening a bakery?
See, I knew I knew it had to be something that I owned, partially
had
owned,
full control
had
over.
some control
Yeah.
over. I knew that I couldn't just produce for other people anymore. That was something I was fairly confident in. And then a few weeks after this conversation, a friend calls and she says, "Hey, do you know my friend Kim Hack who owns Coco & Co?" And I said, I don't know her. I know of her. I know the shop I've been in, but I don't know her. And she said, "Can I put the two of you in touch? Because she's looking for a partner. And I think the two of you would get along." I said, "Sure." So Kim and I started talking. And Kim started Coco & Co. 7-ish years ago. 7.5 years ago, and she had come from not a culinary background. So she had come from marketing and branding and the wine world specifically, and she really loved chocolate. Was very knowledgeable on craft chocolate and the making of chocolate. Is a very good home baker, but was not a culinary person. And she had created the store sort of with the idea that like a wine store brings together a lot of different things so that you can walk in and experience kind of a wide range of things in the wine world. There was nothing like that for chocolate. And so that's what she wanted to create. So she wanted to create this place where you could, if chocolate could touch it, you could get it there. So bars, confections, bonbons, baked goods, pastries, etc. And she had run it for a long time, sourcing everything from other people.
At the same spot in Old Town?
Same spot in Old Town. So it started as an online business and then went to the same spot in Old Town. And so she was, getting wholesale pastries from one place, and she was having a couple things made to her specifications by, some confectioners, and she was buying, bonbons from a couple different places and the wall of craft bars. And then, for holidays, which are obviously major for chocolate, we're going right now into our busy season, right? So we've got Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter, Mother's Day. Like
this is your World Series.
This is my World Series. Like May to October, we can breathe a little bit, but right now we've got all the holidays in a row.
Yeah.
And so for all of those holidays, she obviously want to bring in special fun things, but she was limited to what other people were selling. So, maybe it was the same thing year after year after year from a certain maker, or, she'd have to place her order 3 months in advance. And if she ran out 2 weeks before the holiday, that's it. Yeah. People would come in all the time saying, "Can I order a birthday cake? Can I get something custom?" And she didn't have the capacity or the ability to do that. So she knew to build the business into what she really thought it could be, she needed someone who could do all of those things. This is where I come in. So, we talked for a long time before deciding to partner, months. And it's been very different, and it's been over a year now, and it's been very different than I anticipated in a lot of ways. But, when I sat down to think about what would I want if I were opening a thing, and the first thing that popped in my head is, it's kind of like Coco & Co., except that all the things would be made in-house. Right. Like I have never been one of those pastry chefs who only wanted to do one thing, sometimes to my detriment. Sometimes I wish I had been like, I'm just going to be a chocolatier, and I'm just going to do bonbons, and I'm going to do the best bonbons of anyone. But I don't like just doing one thing.
It's kind of limited, right? Like, I mean, you've trained at all these places, you have all this experience, and just to cut it out and just focus on one element of this vast
And look, sometimes industry. That sounds like a really good idea. Like, I look around at all of these micro businesses and I'm like, oh man.
I think you'd be so bored. So bored. I mean, I don't know you that well, but I think you'd be really fucking bored.
Right? That's always my problem. So I wanted to, be able to do breakfast pastries. I wanted to be able to do bonbons. I wanted to be able to do confections. I wanted the holidays. I love the holidays. Yeah. Like I love being able to do all these really unique things and change them every year. Yeah. And I really like doing cakes. Again, not all the time, but as much as I do them. So I really wanted to do all of those things, and this was the opportunity to be able to do that, and to be a partial owner, and to have some say, and eventually to be able to take it over and run.
Did you feel the restrictions had been lifted? Or did it take a while for you to realize, I don't have anyone, I can do anything I want? Or was it immediately?
Really hard.
Yeah.
No, it was a really hard transition because I would just say ideas out loud and there was no one to tell me no. It was up to me to decide if that was a good idea, a bad idea, a profitable idea, and not if that was something that, sounded great but was going to cause me to work 24 hours a day for 3 weeks straight. There's no one to bounce that off. I mean, I have a partner, obviously, so she and I can bounce some things, but we do have very different knowledge bases and skill sets. So, we have to trust each other to some extent. So if I said, hey, I have this really great idea and we're going to do this, she's like, can you do it? I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it. No problem. Yeah. And then Meg's sleeping at the kitchen.
3 days later.
Right. You know, so like it was really hard. And like, I realized that I was editing myself in my head before ever saying things out loud.
Right.
I was already talking myself down from ideas before letting them out.
Yeah, but you knew in your subconscious, you knew what was going to work and what wasn't. Even though it was a crazy idea, you know how to dissect it and be like, okay, we should do this.
Yeah, but I still had like everyone else, like I still, for a long time, I had those other voices just already filtering into my head, so I wouldn't even say things because I'd talk myself out of them based on imaginary friends.
Correct.
So I got past that and sort of like bounced to the other end of we can do everything.
Right. We're having conversations in your shower with your shampoo bottles.
And then, you know, I've had to bounce back now and get smart about, you know, what's achievable, what, you know, I want to build everything in one day. I don't want, like, gotta remind myself that.
But how does it go from being a plated dessert chef at a fine dining restaurant to figuring out what croissants you're going to make each day? Or a new breakfast pastry? Or... I mean... baking a chocolate into a ghost for Halloween.
You know, I think like everything I've always done, like I've always dabbled a little bit in everything. And I've worked at places starting with True, where it wasn't just about plated desserts. We had the Mignardises cart, which had 12 different little, you know, things. We had a chocolate tray. We had, you know, so I started my career really wanting to sort of be a jack of all trades to an extent, you know, and going through different jobs, being able to focus a little bit more, a little bit less on various things. And so it's really all of my experience gelling together. It's also a lot of research. It's a lot of eating places and, you know, trying things and gathering ideas and brainstorming. And like it's a process, but that's, again, I mean, even going back to what I said about theater, it's the process that I love.
Correct.
Like it's the creative process.
You're wired for it.
I am kind of, you know, and that's the fun thing. I mean, sometimes it seems like a nightmare. I'm like, God, I have to come up with a new whatever for December.
So where do you go for inspiration?
Oh God, all over the place. You know, it's very easy to scroll Instagram. I have such a love-hate relationship with Instagram. You know, I love books. I'm a bookophile. Cookbooks and non-cookbooks. I'm, you know, I have stacks of books everywhere. Going to eat places, you know, one thing, so my husband now works from home, but he has to travel a little bit sometimes. So, and he has to go to like places that I wouldn't necessarily choose to travel to. Cincinnati, Tampa, Minneapolis, places that, and not anything against those places, but not like
major food city, major
I have
hubs.
3 days off. Where should I go? You know, those places weren't necessarily on my radar. But with him traveling to these places and he's gone a week, I suddenly realized that, you know, I can take off on a Wednesday, and they're all kind of in the Midwest. They're all drivable. So he flies out on Sunday. I drive on Wednesday and meet him for a couple days. He's at work, and I run around to all the bakeries I can find and chocolate shops.
Oh, that's smart.
And then we drive back together, and I kind of love it. Like you know, I kind of love the long drives. I've never been someone who loved long drives, but like 5-6 hours is like,
that's the sweet spot.
That's the sweet, like that's doable. I wouldn't want to do much more than that, but it's kind of nice to have my own time and not
listen
be away
and
listen to some podcasts or some music or whatever. And then I've always loved traveling, and I love getting lost in new places or just sort of wandering new places. You know, I always sort of I love doing that in Europe and South America and whatever, and I haven't been to any of those places since 2020. 2019.
I have a theory about traveling and vacationing. There are two different things in my mind.
Oh, totally.
Traveling to me is taking yourself out of your comfort zone, seeing something new, being in a place where you don't speak the language, you don't know the terrain, you've never been to before, having to find a pastry shop or seeking something out. Being on vacation to me is laying on a beach, unplugging the phone, going to bed early, waking up early, you know, eating a salad, you know, and recharging the batteries. And you can travel while you're on vacation, you can vacation while you travel, but they're two completely different things.
So I'm not a vacationer.
I'm not either. I mean, every once in a while I'll go to the spa, but like a day on the beach and I'm like, I gotta,
so bored.
This is what, Jesus Christ.
I can't do
Let's
it.
go into town to the taqueria.
Yep.
Let's go into town to taqueria. Like I can't, you know.
My husband had to do some heavy convincing to get me to go on a cruise for our honeymoon. Because I was like, let's go somewhere and run ourselves ragged. Like, no, just,
it's
okay
exhausting.
to relax for a minute.
But I think traveling, you know, most people they want to travel and they think vacationing and traveling is flying to Europe. It's not. It's getting your car and driving to Cincinnati and being like, okay, I have to find good coffee, or let's talk to a pastry chef and see where the best croissant is, or where's the best cacio e pepe.
Yeah, and that's been really fun. Like that's been, and again, not something that I would have done before.
It's getting yourself out of your comfort zone, and then your brain is open to like different adventures, you know.
And like this sort of Midwestern, regional travel is just not something that was really on my radar. And it's, I'm not going to go to Cincinnati just to go to one bakery that I want to go to, but okay, I'm going to go to that bakery now. Let's find three other places.
Find another one, right? Yeah.
It was really interesting and fun. That's been kind of another perk of.
So how does that set you up for changing the menu and inspiration?
I think in this retail situation we have, which it's so confusing even to us, because it's a little bit of a retail shop, it's a little bit of a cafe, it's a little bit of a coffee shop, it's a little bit of a bakery, it's kind of a little bit of all of those things, and not overwhelmingly any of them, which is challenging. And that's both what we love about it and what makes it hard, because the list of the 10 best bakeries in Chicago comes out, the 10 best whatever, and we're never on those lists because we don't fall solidly into one of these categories, which is one of the reasons I don't love those lists. But
but what is the category? Like, people say, what's the concept? It's a fucking restaurant. You come and you eat, you pay, you leave. That's the concept. What's your bakery concept? We make fucking great croissants.
Right.
And then you want to buy chocolate?
Right.
So, that needs to be destroyed, the concept.
I know.
It's not Epcot Center.
No. No, and, again, the easiest way I can describe it is this: if it can be chocolate, we have it. Or something like that.
Yeah, we can pickle that.
Right. We can chocolate that. Pickle. And so there are some things that are more standard that people expect us to have that are just sort of mainstays, either because they were there before and we have a lot of longtime guests, or, we have a plain croissant. Yeah. We have a chocolate croissant. We have, we have the things that are sort of
the greatest
mainstays,
hits.
Right? And then there's like the peripheral stuff. So there's the seasonal, the stuff that we can kind of bring in seasonally, certainly in terms of like pastries, but also like the brownie or the layer cake or some of those things can, we can have a little bit more fun seasonally. And then there's the holiday stuff, which, we blow out totally. Which is so fun for me. And like last year, now I've been through the whole season, right? So I know
it's a good barometer.
I know what numbers are. I know what worked, what didn't. I have all the equipment I need. Yeah. Like last year, we kind of launched me coming into this business publicly beginning of October. So we're in it. We're in the thick of it. I've got all these ideas, not enough equipment. I was buying molds like every 4 days to try to keep up. And I had this idea that we were going to do chocolate Christmas trees. Like I still love this idea. And it's like a chocolate Christmas tree lot where you go in and like every tree is a little different and you pick out the tree you want.
No way.
I think it's a fantastic idea, except for the person who's making all the chocolate Christmas trees.
Which is you.
Which is me, and every single one has to be different. Like, oh my God, what am I doing? So I learned from that experience. There's a range this year. And I have all the molds I need, and I'm not, I'm a little bit smarter. We're figuring out packaging, and we're figuring out, on top of all of the costs are going up and all of the shortages and all of the everything else that everyone's navigating, like on top of all of that. So the holidays, we really get to blow it out, be super creative, do different things. And then because it's our business and there's no one to like have to print menus or have to do this or that, like I can say, like literally yesterday, I'm like, I've got some extra croissant dough, I've got some pastry cream, I'm making this special Danish. We have it for one day. That's it. We have it for one day. Here it is. It's great.
Yeah. Well, that's a marketing aspect. Like, hey, we make 30 of these. Come and get it,
Absolutely. Yeah. So that aspect of it is really fun, that like if I do have an idea, I can run it for 2 days. And if it sells, great. We've added something to the stable. And then if it doesn't sell, we're like, all right, well, that doesn't work with this crowd. I mean, it's every restaurant, bakery, shop, whatever it is, you learn from the neighborhood you're in. You learn from the guests and, restaurant, retail, whatever, your Tuesday afternoon customer is different than your Saturday morning customer, and you figure out what those trends are. Yeah. And
me and my brother are going through that right now. We're opening a restaurant, and people are you going to do lunch? And we have a little market in the front where we're going to sell raw pasta and sauces to go. And everyone's saying, are you going to do lunch? Are you going to do brunch? How are you going to do this? And I'm like, we're going to let the neighborhood, because we're in a neighborhood, like dictate what it is. And we're not going to, we're going to put a little bit of thought and process into it, but if we see that there's 1,000 people walking around from 11:30 to 2, then maybe we'll open.
Yeah, be flexible. I mean, we're a chocolate cafe. I sell a ton of quiche.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know, but there's not a lot in that neighborhood, and people are, especially midweek, are looking for some light bites.
Easy
so we sell
breakfast,
a ton of quiche.
Uh-huh.
Like we're talking about breakfast sandwiches right now because apparently everyone's all of a sudden started asking for breakfast sandwiches.
Yeah.
I'm like, I make bonbons, but okay, let's make. I love a breakfast sandwich. I'm not against it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and like my partner's the same way. Like we both want to say yes to everything because we love making people happy, and we want people in the store, and we want. If someone comes in and says, "Oh, I really wish you had this," we're like, "Oh, that's a great idea. We should have that." And then got to rein ourselves back in.
Do you think restraint is your greatest superpower?
Oh no, I'm not good at that at all.
But learning it,
I'm trying to learn it because you can't,
you can't do everything.
You can't do everything. You can't do everything well. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't want to do things if I'm not doing them well. Yeah. Like, could we get a mediocre breakfast sandwich on the menu tomorrow? Sure, we could.
Why?
But why?
Just
I don't want to do that.
Of having it,
yeah. So that we, 5 people are happy.
Gap,
like,
right.
You got to figure out. Again, it has to make sense. You have to economize your time, your labor, your efforts. Like, I don't want to pour 90% of my time into making things that aren't the core of our business. Mm-hmm. We have to figure that out, and that's a challenge of a small business. It's probably a challenge of a big business too. But a small business, there's less people doing all the things, so you have to really make sure that we're spending our energy. And right now we're sort of like at a point where the business, is doing really well. Our sales are up 30-40% over the last few years, which is amazing. Costs are up just as much.
Also, right.
So it's a huge challenge, and the business needs to grow, and has room to grow. But we have to figure out what that growth is, and it's very hard to do that when you're also just keeping the business going. Yeah. When there's 2 people who are,
I get it.
Running it. It's the challenge of small business, and
so what's
hard.
Next?
Oh God. Christmas trees.
We need to open 30 of these. We need to open 30 of these around Chicago.
Honestly, if money were no object, we'd love to open a second or a third location. We've talked a lot about what makes sense. We can see a variety of different concepts working, whether it's a kiosk in a kiosk is the wrong word, but like a little,
I get it, yeah.
In a very nice hotel lobby, a little high-end shop, or if it's, I'd love to do something where we have the ability to do, like more fresh pastries. Like we don't have a cold case, so I can't do like fresh pastries and have cakes and pies and tarts and things on hand. Really, we have very limited space, and I would love to do, a shop where we have more of that kind of thing. All of this requires money and labor. So, trying to figure out that, I think in terms of growth, we're really trying to grow the stuff that's not in the store. So corporate weddings, custom stuff. I'm doing a huge Harry Potter themed custom party in December, which I'm super excited about. Big chocolate dinosaur eggs or dragon eggs.
Yeah.
So, doing things like that and really playing to our strengths. And again, yes, do I want to sell more croissants on Thursday mornings? Absolutely. But I think really we're looking at growth outside the store next.
What about something like the timeout market?
We actually talked to timeout.
Timeout market, if you're listening.
Yeah,
I have an idea for you.
No, we did talk to them. And at the time that we talked to them, it wasn't the right move for us. We were still getting kind of off the ground with all of the newness.
Yes.
Something like that I think would make sense in the right neighborhood at the right time. We're a high-end product. Yeah. And we have a range. Look, you can come in and get a cookie or a brownie. It's not the cheapest cookie or brownie. It's a really high quality cookie and brownie, but you can get a $3 or $4 item, but you can also get a not a $3 or $4 item. So the right market for us is, a little bit of a challenge. And just something that we have to think about. And so, it's we have these conversations all the time. Like, what's the right direction to grow, and what do we need to make that growth happen? Like, right now I'm working in a shared kitchen. I have 100 square feet. I have 1 assistant. Yeah. There's only so much that can be done.
Right. You're probably tapped out with everything. You're doing a lot.
I'm at the maximum of what I can do with the space I have. storage. I mean, my garage is full. I told my husband it would be 3 months maximum, and it's been a year and 3 months. We've been trying to build out our own kitchen, but that's been a whole range of challenges of, that I never expected in terms of, finding the right space and contractors and architects and code and blueprints and money again, and it's so daunting. Challenging and daunting, and I don't know how to do any of it, and that drives me crazy. Like I, again, am someone who researches, and like I like to know what I'm stepping in, and to not know. And again, we're the ones running it and making the decisions. There's no one to steer the ship except for us. So we got to steer it the right direction.
Right. It's I'm going through the process of opening a restaurant now, and I think I've opened 12 restaurants in my life, but I've always came on board of construction has started.
Right.
This is your kitchen. There's the hood. Right. Design it however you want. It's like, okay, well, I can figure out that's where that's going to go. That's easy. Well, the door is here, and I've never been on board from the beginning of the operating agreement.
Right.
The lawyers.
Yeah.
The raising of the money. The signing the lease. The LOI. Like
the writing the checks.
It's the process of getting with the architect and building, and I had no fucking idea not even how to do it, that it even fucking existed.
Oh my God, I had no clue.
And it was like, I'm talking to my lawyers, and they're asking me these questions, and I'm like, listen guys, I don't know what you're talking about. And the really nice compliment they gave me is like, you're a fast learner. From where we were a year ago to how you're talking about the business model and the performa and the numbers and the ROI, and I'm just like, you just have to learn it as fast as possible.
Right.
Otherwise, when you're going out there to sell yourself to investors, I was so bad. They're like, hey, what's your well, it's kind of we need to raise this amount of money, and I'm gonna do my best, and they're just like, how many investors were like, absolutely fucking not in the beginning.
This guy's a nightmare.
until I figured it out. Like, good luck, kid.
I thought, this is now so funny to me. So I thought that renting a space to put our commissary kitchen in, because the idea has always been to have a commissary kitchen, not a kitchen attached to a second location, for various reasons. I thought it was like renting an apartment.
Same. Right.
Like I thought you would go and you would see the space and they would say it's X number of dollars, and you would great, sign on the line. This is awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah, right. I found it on Craigslist.
No, it's more complicated than buying a house.
So fucking complicated.
And I'm staring at these leases and contracts, and thank God my husband has some experience with this stuff, because I'm like, can you read this 47-page contract for an 800 square foot vanilla box and like tell me what?
My lawyer called me and goes, hey, we need to talk about the force majeure clause, and I'm like, bro, I don't even speak French, like what is that? And he explained it to me, and I was like, Joe, I still don't understand what it is. You're gonna have to make this decision for me on your own. This is why I hired you. I have no fucking clue what you're talking about.
Well, and even like having lawyers and having is I'm feeling a bit like a grown-up finally.
We're arguing, me and the landlord we're talking, not arguing, but I have a great landlord, but it was the lawyers were arguing about whether we got 6 parking spots or 7. And I'm like, bro, we've been at this lease for 7 months.
Right.
I want to sign it. I don't give a fuck.
I know.
Let's just take 6.
But then you're scared that you're just going to sign it, and like,
well, it's like, do I need 7? And it's like, we're not dragging this process out anymore. It's we have to finish this because I need construction to start. Like,
I've been part of opening, I don't know, 5 or 6 restaurants, and like you learn that you have to make decisions quickly and kind of like do the best you can and then fix it later if you have to, but that's completely different when you're dealing with somebody else's money.
Or your own money that's very little, like, oh, here's my budget for this, and all of a sudden you're $400,000 over budget, and you're just like, okay.
Or you're comparing 3 spreadsheets of buying 8-quart containers from different places because you want to save 20 cents, so that over the course of the entire budget it adds up to like it's tough.
It's hectic.
Yeah.
But you do want to grow. Like you have to grow.
We have to grow. Mm-hmm. We have to grow, or it's just a fun hobby.
Would you ever? It's a fun hobby. Yeah, right.
At the end of the day,
great for now. Again, the question is, do you miss plated desserts?
Every once in a while. Mm-hmm. To be perfectly honest, do not miss working in restaurants. I loved them. Mm-hmm. I have no like bad feelings, ill feelings, obviously bad bad things happened along the way. But
well, it's just a different animal, right?
I loved it for so long, and I was ready to leave when I did.
Yeah.
I miss the people. I miss the camaraderie. I do sometimes miss plated desserts in the way that I sometimes wish I was part of a show, like a play or something like that. So I'm like, oh, I'd love to be part of that. I eat something that's really good. I'm like, I do kind of miss like making an ice cream, but I don't really have time to miss.
Well, you could. I mean, you could always
and I love going to restaurants now. On Friday nights.
Yeah.
What?
Do you ever?
As long as it's at like 4:30 p.m.
Dude, you know what happens to me is like I forget what day it is, and it's like randomly I have a Saturday night off, and let's go to dinner, and I don't know because I go out Monday and Tuesday,
right?
And you walk in, you're like, why is this place so busy? You're like, oh, it's 8:30 on a Saturday, and I'm like, hey, I didn't make a reservation because I'm a fucking idiot.
Right.
Do you have anything for 2 people? And they're like, maybe next month.
Right. I know.
Yeah,
it's great. Even like my husband and I were trying to go out, and I like tried to make reservations for 4 different places. I'm like, they're all booked.
Well, I think like it's so amplified after the pandemic. You can't, at least in Nashville and obviously here too, you can't get into anywhere.
No.
I've been trying to get into Rosemary's since it opened.
Yeah.
And I even messaged Joe, and he's just like, yeah, I can't help you. Like literally, like didn't even respond. That's why I say it's like it's such an amazing time right now to own and operate a restaurant business, but like to get one started.
Well, and it's also just so hard, though. I mean, it's such a double-edged sword because it's a great time. We went through this whole thing of we all had to close down, and everyone was like, support the restaurants. Yeah. Everyone is supporting the restaurants, but now on the back end, we're dealing with the staffing issues. We're dealing with the rising costs of everything, and there's a huge piece. I know a lot of people have talked about this, where like really everyone at large has been underpaying for restaurant food, service, etc. for a long time.
Right.
And so now there's a deprogramming that needs to happen, or a reprogramming, where people have to understand what the true cost of dining out is. And it's not because anyone is being greedy at all. It's because, look, when at pre-COVID at Boca, we were paying cooks $12 to $14 an hour. And if they were making $14, if they'd been there for 2 years. And now cooks at restaurants are starting at 20, 21. I mean, I'm so glad. They're making that money. Absolutely. We all should have been making that money. 100%. I have nothing. It's not to say that anyone should be making less money, but that money has to come from somewhere. It's not like restaurants were making piles of money before and just sitting on it.
Right.
So and then, the cost of all the goods is going up. And again, I'm more aware of this as a small business owner than I ever was. I know how much my eggs cost. I'm like, if I have to separate an egg and only use the yolk or the white, I'm like, oh my God, can I use this for something?
Yes.
Because I know eggs have doubled in the last 6 months.
Better start to learn to preserve and ferment scraps.
Right. I mean, my croissant scraps go into, I make stuff with my croissant scraps. I don't throw any croissant scraps away. And obviously that's just good business, but now, because of all of the rising costs, because of the rising cost of labor, because of the rising cost of ingredients, it's so hard to run these places. And there are more restaurants opening, and cooks since the beginning of time always want to go to the new shiny restaurant. That's just how it is.
Right. But it's a fine line of educating the public and realizing costs are going up, and all of a sudden their favorite bistro in their neighborhood that they might go to once a week or twice a month, a chicken entree is $67 now. Right. And it's like, what the fuck? So that restaurant that they went to all the time, 4 times a month. Now it's a special occasion. The special occasion restaurants that everybody goes to once a year is now it's every couple years.
Absolutely.
And now it's even the casual counter service restaurants, those become the once a week spots.
Paying $18 for a sandwich.
For a sandwich anyway, right? We went and got some tacos yesterday. I won't say where, but it was we had 2 drinks, a couple appetizers, and 1 taco, and it was $85 a person. Yeah. They were like, what the fuck is this?
I mean, I went and got a bagel sandwich and a bagel with cream cheese and maybe a coffee, and it was like $25. I'm like, what is happening?
So how do we educate? It's not even educated because people's salaries aren't going up. No one's going to pay that.
Everyone's struggling. Gas is high. They're buying milk at the grocery store and seeing that it's $5 a gallon or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a tipping point of it being of the value, the perceived value, the actual value, and losing the quantity. And it's, we're just constantly evaluating that. We're constantly looking around at, comp sets and what other people are doing and paying for, and we're reevaluating our costs and making sure that, we're making what we need to be making. And it's a constant juggling act. And then I think we just have to also like look at things, and make sure that we don't have things on the menu, even if we love them, even if other people love them, that don't make money.
Lost leaders.
What are those called? The dogs or the horses? There's all these terms.
It's so important, especially with you, to have those low food cost items being the top sellers.
Yeah, and not even just food costs, because I mean, chocolate's expensive and other things are expensive, but labor in pastry and chocolate is the big thing. And my labor is free, quote unquote, but that doesn't
somebody's
mean that it's actually free. Somebody's got to do it. So and part of that in our growth plan right now, we're looking at equipment, and like there are pieces of equipment that would make my life 1,000 times easier, 100,000 times easier. Those pieces of equipment cost $20,000 plus. So we have to figure out where that tipping point is, and that could maybe be essentially an employee at some point, but. Right now I'm literally doing everything by hand, and I love that. I'm making every single bonbon by hand. I'm hand dipping every single peanut butter bomb and turtle, and that's fun, but that's not
it's not sustainable.
That's not a sustainable, growable business, scalable business. So
what does balance look like to you? What do you do to get outside of your head when you're not thinking about the newest croissant you can make?
Okay, well, I'm always thinking about that. But I think it's funny that I work just as much now, if not more, than I did when I was in restaurants. But
they're coming for us. They're coming for us.
I have better work-life balance. I have just as much stress. But
the stress is different.
The stress is different. And it's also my own. And the time is my own, and the end result is my own. So I'm no longer, bending over backwards and breaking myself for someone else's dream. It's my own. Yeah. It might not be the smartest dream in the world.
It's still your dream.
But it's my dream. And just the difference of working restaurants and if a restaurant is open 7 days a week and dinner service is at 5:00, then you have to be there from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. and that's if you have someone else to close. If you don't, then it's midnight, 1, whatever. Like just having to be in the building, whether it's a slow night, a busy night, is really hard. And now I have to get the pastries there first thing in the morning, so I start work at 4 a.m., 3:30 a.m., 4 a.m. And I have to have the pastries, to the store by 7:30. But then as long as I get my shit done, my time is mine. So I take a painting class on Wednesday morning. So I just know that on Wednesdays from 10 to 1, I'm not in the kitchen, I'm not reachable, I go and do that. If I know that I want to hang out with my husband or my friends or whoever on one day, then I'll work a really long day the day before, make sure I get my shit done so that I can take a shorter day. Like, I have some more flexibility. You're not meandering around a restaurant because there's nothing to do. Hey, let's clean dry storage again. You have to feel you have to be there because someone's going to ask, well, where are you? Which is the worst. Yeah, I'm not here. I have nothing to do. I'm not here. I'm taking a day off. Yeah, you can't really do that. It's harder now for me to take days off. Sure. I work 7 days a week. And a short day is 8 hours. Oh, that's a vacation. I know, right? Right now I don't have an assistant because I'm in between assistants for a few weeks. So when I had, an assistant, and when it wasn't a chocolate holiday season, so May to October, we actually had days where I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I don't actually have to be in this building today. Yeah. I can go to Cincinnati for 3 days, or I can take an admin day, which basically means sit on my computer on my couch with my cat. In your pajamas. In my pajamas. Those days are few and far between, but those days do exist. Yeah, right. And like we decided to close down for 4 days after. Like we're closed Christmas and the 3 days after. We're like, you know what? Like, it's fine. It's fine. I'll take a break. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from restaurants to owning a bake shop? Oh, wow, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. I don't know. I think how to work efficiently has really come into play. Are the deadlines different, or the deadlines are always just deadlines? The deadlines are different because in a restaurant you're sort of just for an example, you've got a dessert menu and it's got 5 items on it. And each of those 5 items has several items, and it's just sort of a rolling inventory. You're never
how long this is going to take, so we got to do this first, right?
And whatever. And so like organizing my time is different.
Yeah.
And that's been a change that I've sort of made differently. Like I used to think, because I go to the store every day and I drop off all the pastries and I essentially inventory everything. I'm like, I can never run out of anything. So that wasn't the most efficient way to use my time. And so I'm getting to the point now where I'm like, if we're out of this one thing for this one day, it's okay.
At a bakery, you want to run out of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And, even some of like the confection stuff or the quiche or whatever, really up until this point, I was like, well, if we run out of meat quiche, or if we're down on meat quiche, we're going to bake more meat quiche for the next day. We have 2 kinds of quiche. We have a veg and a meat, and we can't ever run out of either one. I'm like, you know what? It's okay. Like if we run out of meat, but we still have all of the veggie, people are going to eat veggie tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like,
They'll figure it out.
With that. And like, it's worth it to like not, to only bake quiche twice a week or whatever it is, instead of 5 days a week. To make my time more efficient.
Yeah.
And like, so it's a different way of organizing my time. And especially because I'm doing such disparate things between, making bonbons and making croissants, and like, you can't multitask that stuff.
Yeah.
You can't laminate dough and make bonbons at the same time. They're completely separate things with completely separate needs. And like, that's kind of a crazy thing to push out of a very small kitchen space. So it requires a lot of engineering in a different way than I'm used to doing. But I'm learning that.
Right on. I guess we're always learning.
We're always learning.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like, say no to myself, which sounds crazy, but like to allow myself to not freak out about running out of something, or to say, I don't need to do that this week, or I can't do that this week, instead of just saying, yes, I got to do it no matter what it takes. Sometimes I got to say, I'm going home today at 5 p.m. no matter what.
Right.
And whatever doesn't get done for the next day, nothing's going to
it'll be there tomorrow.
Do you know what I mean? Like the store is not to close if I don't get this one thing done. And
that's a very restaurant train of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. So deprogramming your brain from that.
A little bit.
Well, it was amazing sitting down talking with you today.
Yeah,
if people want to find you, where do we go?
I'm only on Instagram in terms of social media. So I'm Meg_Galus, very creative and original. So find me there. Or come into the store and say hi.
Where's the store at?
We're in Old Town, which is just on the north side of Chicago. So we're just north on Wells.
It's a super delicious pastry shop. I ate there, about a year ago. It's about a year ago. Me and Ari and Angie went
I think
there.
he likes the cookies.
He loves the cookies.
If I do remember.
He loves the cookies.
The cookies are good.
Well, thanks for sitting down with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
It was great chatting with you.
Thanks for coming in.
Right on.
It's good to see you.
Thank you.